Okay, so yeah, so people, I'm gonna go ahead and go over this with you guys. Make it brief, quick, to the point. Another fabulous video about the truth, and this is how the truth will set you free. This is Astro Voodoo. Astro meaning astrotheology, astrophysics, astronomy, astrology. Voodoo meaning religion, spiritual, ritual, all of that I combined together to make up my own little thing, my own little brand, and I call it Astro Voodoo. And this series is The Truth Will Set You Free. Now, the truth about the Bible is the first episode of this series. And you can see I have a picture there of a old picture around the Roman days when they start copying from other more advanced civilizations that they took out the game. Just want to just show you these pictures and then how this predates all of the Messiah worshiping and how they had intertwined and made up a person that people would worship. And then they still stole from other religions and other practices and ritualistic practices, but they hide themselves and they tell lies about their beginnings. And so this is who they are. So I'm just going to go ahead and go about this. We're going to start off, since everybody is familiar about the Bible and how the Bible has impacted the world today in a whole lot of different areas. We're going to tell you about the truth about the Bible today. Now, the second slide right here is the third slide, actually, is the invention of religion. So what goes on is that they invented so many different ways in which they want to control humankind, and how religion is, which is a bad thing. Religion is definitely something that is known to control and bind you into believing, as a collective belief, of the unseen forces in which operate on other dimensional levels. But yet and still, religion can be defined as just a set of worshiping activities held by a group. So the belief in and worship of a superhuman controlling power, that's what religion is, and especially a personal God or God. So you have monotheism, you have polytheism. These two isms are separate because monotheism is just the idea of one being one God, one supreme deity, that other maybe powerful entities that fall up under him. And gods, it's almost like a plural thing as to more than one. And what that represents is polytheism. And then that's like a group of gods that share. And then a lot of times in polytheistic religions, there's always a chief deity at the very top. So this is some old stuff that come way before the concept of a Messiah as a right-hand man to Almighty God. And that's way before. So this is the ideas about the relationship between science and religion. So this is what I'm discussing. This is part of the whole portion of what we'll be discussing today. And I'm just going to go over that and then give you a brief explanation of my conclusions and how this thing that we call religion and personal grace and all of the things that go with religion, how it all began. I'm going to try to describe it very briefly, and then we'll go deep into it, because this is going to be an ongoing series until we uncover the truth. How that sound? Okay. Later in the old days, I say old days, I mean over 3,500 years ago, around the time where historians call the Bronze Age, Bronze and Iron Age, religion in Europe, as elsewhere, was predominantly polytheistic according to their historical records. You got to realize that the ancient Egyptians, they never did have any type of historic records that they studied. And they didn't even make their history. They didn't write it down. You know, it was passed on. They didn't have that need. Very advanced and superbly advanced civilization that we can only fathom the advancement that they held to this day. So the Bronze and Iron Age religion in Europe, they were predominantly polytheistic when I said polytheism. And then again, I gave you a brief definition from my own state of mind, but I'm gonna give you a definition of what it really is. It's the belief in or worship of more than one God. I did allude to that, you know, multiple gods are being worshiped, and then that they worship these gods because they associate them as they have stolen from Egypt. And these books that I've read have definitely captivated my mind. Is one, it's called The Stolen Legacy. It's definitely a great book. I do suggest getting it. Just look up Stolen Legacy, and you'll love it. And the polytheism of the ancient Near East. So you got to realize that in areas such as the Yahwehan or the Abrahamic religions are supposed to have come from, we would call that the Near East. So in that regard, we have the opposite of polytheism is monotheism. And that's a noun word, just so is polytheism, meaning that, you know, people, places, and things. It's a thing. It's a monotheism, the doctrine or belief that there's only one God. But like I said, normally that can be it, but he might have some other beings that he might have, like, for example, in the Christian religion, in the very beginning of the Bible, it says that, and also in Judaism, and I would also say Islam and other wordings, is that he created angels or other forms of beings with certain levels of intelligence as opposed to just humans. So that's to me, that's folklore, that's mythos, but it might be some truth in it. We're gonna uncover the truth. And we might not do it today or tomorrow, but we will continue to search for the truth. Okay. Polytheism was the typical form of religion before the development and spread of the universalist Abrahamic religions of Christianity and Islam. Hey, look at this guy. I don't want you guys looking in any perverted type of way, as you see a butt-naked little boy. Well, who would even take a picture that perverse of a little boy showing himself in that way? You know, it's kicking over the instruments. You know, it doesn't look like it's, you know, it does look like orderly clutter, but then, you know, he's showing himself in a very perverse way. Definitely put some clothes on and leave the little boys alone. So notable polytheistic religions are practiced today include Taoism, Shintoism, or Chinese folklore religion, and Japanese Shinto and Santeria, most traditionally African. Those are some traditional African religions, and definitely those are polytheistic religions where it's more than one God. And as I stated before, that's definitely a plural form of just putting more and many into the context as opposed to just one. So this is I'm breaking down the basis. It'll be a reason for this, and then hopefully we come to a solid conclusion that can lead us closer to the truth. Now, most ancient Greeks recognized the 12 major Olympian gods and goddesses: Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Demeter, Athena, Ares, Aphrodite, Apollo, Artemis, Hephaestus, and the weird Latin names, Hermes. Yes, and that's like a name brand, Hermes. And then also, it's just the Hermes Trismegistus, twice great, thrice great, three times great. This definitely has some bearing on some deep metaphysical rhetoric and talk that stem from an ancient Egyptian teaching, and either Hestia or Dionysus. A lot of these names, if not all of these names, are very familiar to those that study literature and understand how the Greeks operated. And these were the gods and goddesses of Greece, so you would automatically assume that they were polytheistic in nature. Now, the Greeks had no religious texts, and they regarded as revealed scriptures of sacred origin, but very old texts, including Homer's Iliad and Odyssey and the Homeric hymns. That's the text that we derive these gods. They didn't have a religion. They didn't have a way to worship the spirituality. And then they didn't understand that concept. So they had to make up a concept through mythos and mythology. And then this is how proceeds the biblical context. And it also gives you insight how they tried to distort the Egyptian teachings. Now, while some traditions, such as mystery cults, did uphold certain texts as canonic within their own cult praxis, such texts were respected but not necessarily accepted as a canonic. These words kind of trip me up sometimes because they shouldn't be there, outside their circle. So finally, some texts called the Irology, the Greek, by the ancient source originated from outside the Greek world or was supposedly adopted in remote times, representing yet more different traditions within the Greek belief system. So this is the text that led to a greater understanding on how they can manipulate the minds of the masses by creating supernatural forces and attributing these supernatural forces to humans, or the forces we can identify, kind of personifying the aspect of a higher being, or a superb being that controls everything in the sky. Yeah, this is pretty deep. It gets deeper. Now, there's a book titled The History of White People. It's a 2010 book by Neil Irvin, painter, in which the author explores the idea of whiteness throughout history, on how, beginning with ancient Greece, the history of white people, because they don't go back further than Egyptians or those who are on the continent that we call Africa today. So the book describes how that began in ancient Greece and continuing through the beginning of scientific racism in early modern Europe to 19th through 21st to this very day in the centuries of America. Now, the Bible is a European construct composed in the facilities at the Library of Alexandria. That's what we're touching on, and that's what we're going to be discussing, how Alexander conquered Egypt, and he took it from the Persians, and then before his demise, he was able to not only rule Egypt, but also appoint a successor, which was his general. a warrior, uh, you know, from a European descent, and he made him the ruler of Egypt. So therefore, they declared themselves king or pharaoh of Egypt. And then he commissioned scribes and learned men and those who had even created the mythos of those Greek gods that we were just talking about on this page. These Greek gods we just talking about, the 12 major Olympian gods. They created that, these same people, and then they housed these teachings in Alexander. So it started as just a small cult movement. And then we're not talking necessarily the Bible, but the first books of the Bible, the Torah and stuff of that nature. And that's what we call now the Greek. Now, it wasn't the first Ptolemy. Let me get this right. I think it was the second Ptolemy, because this was like, it's called a Ptolemaic dynasty. I think we'll go a little bit deeper into that as we move on. But Greek mythology predates the biblical narrative. That's what I was just trying to allude to, that they had temples and spaces dedicated to these gods, to Zeus, to Hera, to Poseidon, to Aphrodite. And then some of those temples still stand to this day in ruins. But this predates the Christian era, and before the Bible was as popular, or the Judaic religion was as popular as it has become to this day. Any of them. And I'm talking Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Now, Greek mythology predates the biblical narrative. That's true. Greek religion was of Hellenistic origin, which consisted of stories of fantasy and myth to convey meanings. So none of this was true, you know. So they kind of, like, what I'm trying to allude to is that they were using the same writing style to construct another story of a rational, nationalistic, and a radical change of a paradigm that would affect people for thousands of years. So this was a slow process, but yet and still they used the same writing style. They were already equipped with the storytelling concept, because that's how it goes. It's a story concept. The ancients, they never did write their history. They would write something down, you know, as you say, because they invented the papyrus. So they did have a form of communication in that regard. It meant something. It meant something. It was the main communication. Even the pictures and stuff, they didn't draw for art or aesthetics. They drew for a deeper understanding. That's why, you know, the hieroglyphic thing and debates, we'll get deep into that, but this is, you know, we dig deep into the truth. Usually religion is the construct of the conquerors. So if I come take your stuff, or I come take your land and pillage and rape and rob everybody and kill and murder and, just take your land, I can establish my rules, my laws, my religion, my book to read, and then we can have this established from here on out until, the truth is released to everybody, and it's a different collective consciousness. And I think we're headed that way. Let's move on. Okay, so the Greek mythology is the body of myths originally told by the ancient Greeks. See, I'm really getting deep into this Greek stuff in this episode because the Greeks are just a very powerful people because they were able to be the first of European descent, as we know today, to have a profound impact on Western civilization. And this is the basis of the beginning of that conquest. Now, originally told by the ancient Greeks in the genre of ancient Greek folklore, these stories concern the origin and nature of the world. They was already adapted that. The lives and activities of deities, heroes, and mythological creatures. The book of Revelations, Daniel, so-called prophecy, sorry, and the origins and significance of the ancient Greeks' own cult and ritual practices. Modern scholars study the myths to shed light on the religious and political institutions of ancient Greece and to better understand the nature of myth-making itself. Myth-making. And look, they shed light on the religious and political institutions of ancient Greece. So they admit that through the research that they were expert at myth-making itself. And that's why there's an effort to study the nature of myth-making, to see where we've arrived to. That's Alexander the Great. This is supposed to be him, a picture on the wall, serious. That's how he got down. Even them days, they copied the Egyptians, but that's a serious picture because that mean it is. But I don't know how old it is. I don't know if they're lying, but he was definitely of European descent. I would say a strong-looking young Italian with big eyes. But there's a very artistic mural, and I think it's dated back then. And definitely a conqueror. He got something on his breast shield. Might be some touch up there. I don't know. It's just in great shape to be him, or who we think is him. And the Alexandrian conquest spread Greek culture to the Levant. That's what I'm saying. They all the way up in the Levant he was in. During this time, currents of Judaism were influenced by a Hellenistic philosophy developed from the 3rd century B. Like I said, they grew. They kind of like a wave. It grew slowly but surely until it became kind of like something that just come out of nowhere. Notably, the Jewish diaspora in Alexandria, culminating in the compilation of the Septuagint. So it was like just a clan of people. Now, it might be a history of somebody, but like I said, it was mythos included. An important advocate of the symbiosis of Jewish theology and Hellenistic thought is Philo, which I will have a link. We're going to work on that. This is the first video of this series. Alexander consolidated the Egyptians by the respect he showed for their religion. He had mad props given to the Egyptian religion because they didn't have a religion. It was all war, take, kill. Till he learned that, hey man, this is not the way to go. This is not this, that's it got into his mind as time progressed. So he accepted that they knew the truth. But he appointed Macedonians to virtually all the senior posts in the country. He still got to run the show. So, he had the priest in his control. And he founded a new Greek city named after him, Alexandria. And this is to be the new capital. The wealth of Egypt could now be harnessed for Alexander's conquest of the rest of the Achaemenid Empire. Early in 331 BC, he was ready to depart, and he led his forces away to Phoenicia. He left Cleomenes of Naucratis as the ruling monarch to control Egypt in his absence. Alexander never returned to Egypt. Never. But like I said, he put his people in charge in order to take over that. And this was in early 331 BC when he made his move, according to, sources and historical accounts. Now, you can believe me, you may not, but my goal is for us to combine together as a collective and to search for the truth. I could be wrong. We all could be wrong. Sometimes you're right, but we got to definitely do away with the pridefulness and then, just combine on the same accord. That's my suggestion. Now, the Macedonian kings who succeeded Alexander the Great as rulers of the Near East wanted to promote Hellenistic culture. See, we got that Hellenistic thing is very important to note. But they was also, even though they were the Macedonian kings that Alexander put into control Egypt in the Near East, they was into promoting the Zeus and the Aphrodite and the Poseidon stuff, and that's what we call Hellenistic culture. And learning throughout the known world, they want to promote that in the learning that they have acquired from taking the stuff from Egypt. And they wanted to run the world with it. Okay? That's what they were promoting. Mythology was at the heart of everyday life in ancient Greece. Yeah, because they would, even the astrology, as it came up with the zodiac. And there's a mythological basis behind the description of how they describe these constellations in the sky that have been studied for millions and millions of years to come up with the connection that we know today. And it's a higher thought, but that's another story. I'm going to go into astrology on an up-and-coming episode. Now, Greeks regarded mythology as a part of their history. They use myth to explain natural phenomena, cultural variations, traditional enmities, and friendships. After the rise of philosophy, history, prose, and rationalism in the late 5th century BC, the fate of myth became uncertain. So people weren't buying that myth stuff because it wasn't working. The Egyptians had a concrete way of having their spiritual system set in motion. And these new conquerors, and from the so-called European continent from the north, had no idea how to integrate themselves within that because of the pridefulness and the ego. And it became uncertain. And mythological genealogies gave place to a conception of history which tried to exclude the supernatural. So it wasn't that popular, all of this storytelling of, I would even say Bible. Moses reached out his staff, and there's a wall on each side of the sea. When then they drowned the pharaohs as they made it right across and didn't kill no one else but the Egyptians. And all of that is, I would say, mythological. So, Hippocrates is credited with being the first person to believe that diseases were caused naturally. But we had doctors, even 2,000 years before this guy, a so-called guy, we don't know if he existed or not. This is a vague picture. This is definitely a modern interpretation of what they think he might have looked like or whatever. And Hippocrates is credited with being the first person to believe that diseases were caused naturally. How is the first person when there's other people been on the planet for millions and millions of years, and then they had no problem treating their disease, their medicine, their medical, they were doctors before this guy even came around. Not because of superstition and God's. Hippocrates was credited by the disciples, but they credit him to be the first of the Europeans. So let's get that right. This is the truth. We get down with the truth. Disciples of Pythagoras, of Elean philosophy and medicine. He separated the discipline of medicine from religion, believing and arguing that disease was not a punishment inflicted by the gods, but rather the product of environmental factors, diet, and living habits. Okay. All right. So this guy was just definitely on top of his stuff to be European descent. But it's just common sense, at the end of the day, you know what I'm saying? It took them that long to get some type of common sense. Like, damn, this is not working. This is why we dying, because we eating anything. We're not washing our genitals. We're not washing our private parts. Hey, today we're going to little deep into the dive. We're getting close. And I think it's going to be a day in which we're going to stumble upon the truth. Couple more slides. We're going to call this episode. And into the next episode, we're just going off with the mythology thing. Hellenistic Judaism. Now, the Jews also adopted the current Greek literary fact. Like I was telling you, they were masters at telling these stories. Just like the Hollywood producers or the writers that write scripts and imagination people, they were definitely highly intelligent of this thing. This is the most intelligent group of Europeans that touched down on the scene. These are the forefathers of what we call now the Western Kingdom. Now, the Jews also adapted the current Greek literary fashion of retelling Homeric and other ancient legends and modernized novelistic versions, well seasoned with romantic elaborations of their own tradition. This is the Jews. This is what you combine both Judaism and Hellenism, and we have Hellenistic Jews, and we have the Hellenistic Judaism, which is the same thing I was saying. This is where the Bible comes from, the Greek Septuagint, and we will move on. Now, unlike other ancient Near Eastern gods, such as with Greek religion, the Hebrew God is portrayed as unitary and solitary. Consequently, the Hebrew God's principal relationships are not with other gods, but with the world, and more specifically with the people he created. So this is the monotheistic way. This is that's what Judaism presents. But keep in mind, It comes from the Hellenistic, which is the polytheism. So, but they've learned how to combine it and then put it into a monotheistic movement. It was a movement of monotheism that they think that was more effective in keeping the people in control. So Judaism thus begins with ethical monotheism, the belief that God is one and is concerned with the actions of mankind, but he killing people in the Bible. Look it up. God kills more people than the devil. I mean, millions, as opposed to just a few that the devil has killed. God has ordered killings and stuff and destroyed people throughout the whole Bible. Greek myth in the Bible. Greek myth by Bruce Luden is a good book to reference. And then what it tells you is that Greek myth in the Bible argues that classical mythological literature and the biblical text were composed in a dialogic relationship. Luden examines a variety of Greek myths from a range of sources, analyzing parallels between biblical episodes and Hesiod, Euripides, Argonatic myth, selections from Ovid's Metamorphoses, and Homeric epics. It's saying there's parallels, there's the same thing. So this book here is definitely crucial into finding the truth and letting you know that they're telling the same thing the Greeks were saying in their Hellenistic, Polynistic Zeus. Look at that. It says Homeric epic. The Homer's tales, the Argonautic myths, you know, these old Greek myths from a range of sources, variety. So they combine that. So these are the same people, actually. And this is where they were. This is the timeline. This is the Hellenistic Greece. This is when it started, from 326 BC to 156 BC. The Egyptians were thousands of years before them. They just came on the scene, pop up. I don't know how long they were there or what they were called before that. Because you got to realize that they went around naming themselves because they invented their own thing and they took up an alphabet. I don't know the exact origins of it. I have to do that research, but definitely the alphabet that we know today, it all was birthed in Greece. Now, these are the wars of the Adachi. This is 326 BC to like 2081 BC. I guess that's when you're going in to all of the stuff that we were talking about before, a little bit after your boy Alexander. I think he was going off the scene, and then it kind of like got nasty. But the Ptolemaic kingdom took control in 305 BC. And then that's when the things got in control of Greece as to some sort of set order commission with the Macedonian kings situation, but the Ptolemies came out on top. They must have found favor. I think Alexander had a role in that. And so, you know, this is the history. This is where we're coming from. This is where it goes. Now, these are the areas and the crevices, important sites of the Hellenistic diaspora, the medieval intellectual centers, sites of medieval massacres, Kabbalistic centers, sites with important Jewish quarters, and other important cities. These are the Hellenistic Jews. And look, you got to realize, and you wonder how the Bible comes from all the way down here to way up here in the European continent. How did it get from here to here? To here, the London, all in this area where King James got it. How did it get from here, Jerusalem? Now I can see it getting here, but that's still a stretch. So, you know, look how many hands it got to go through. In them days, it took 3 years to get from here to there. 5, 10 years to get from here to here. So, you know, there's something that's deep involved with that. But these are your Hellenistic. And then we told you Hellenistic is the Greek. And then we told you also back here that they adapted the Greek literary fashion of retelling Homeric and other ancient legends in modernized novelistic versions, what we call now the Bible. We're doing a deep dive into the truth. But look at all of that. Look at all that. These are important sites of the Hellenistic diaspora. So important. All up in here, over here, over there, Pakistan, all over here, all around here. And then there, all up in here. This after the rulership and stuff of the original people that were around here. Look at them up here, over here, you know, just countless. You know, it had to be a mob of them. If this is where they were at, and those weren't black people, why would they be up in here? So, you know, there you go. We're just killing all the Hebrew Israelite folklore because we got everything coming from here. And it stemmed from when they took over here. This guy, this Alexandria, named after him, Alexander, there's this Drea. That's more than coincidence. You know, this is deep. Let's move on. Now, Ptolemy ruled Egypt from 323 BC, nominally in the name of the joint kings Philip III and Alexander IV. However, as Alexander the Great's empire disintegrated, Ptolemy soon established himself as ruler in his own right. He was a goon. Ptolemy successfully defended Egypt against an invasion by Perdiccas in 321 BC and consolidated his position in Egypt and the surrounding areas during the wars of the Diadochi, 322 to 301 BC. In 305 BC, Ptolemy took the title of king, and as Ptolemy Isator, you know, savior, he founded the Ptolemaic dynasty that was to rule Egypt for nearly 300 years. They got down. They had to suck up all of the stuff. It was a 300 year. They put in the work. This is the Ptolemy Soter. And Ptolemy took the title of king as Ptolemy Soter, which means the Messiah or the Savior of mankind. So he he put himself on a high pedestal. This is when the debauchery comes in. He founded the Ptolemaic dynasty that was to rule Egypt for nearly 300 years. Suck that in. This is when Europeans ruled Egypt right before, in this time frame. We gotta realize the Africans ruled Egypt for thousands of years. You can't even go back and count how long it was because they don't have sufficient data to search that far. They're guessing. And then they're not gonna go as far back as they should because they want us to think that the Greeks were close, but it wasn't. It was like by a long shot that the Egyptians' civilization predates theirs by thousands of years. And now another tradition that was preserved is pseudeographical letter of Aristus presents Ptolemy. This is Ptolemy, I believe, dressed like an Egyptian, as the driving force behind the translation of the Hebrew Bible into Greek. So he took on all the headdress, all the stuff that the Egyptians had. And he kind of looked like this picture. I don't think this Ptolemy, but he kind of looked like this picture. And he embraced all of the thing because he had his thing. It looked like this picture. This guy got like a scepter in his hand, definitely on some warrior stuff. Looked like he's about to hit her, but I doubt it. Just they had meaning, but they're pictures that we have yet to fully convey, but we definitely are getting close with the truth. Now, he commissioned this. Ptolemy the Soter, he was the driving force. It was his idea behind the translation of the Hebrew Bible into the Greek as the Septuagint. It was a play on languages here. They're making up languages because Hebrew has a close connection to being of Greek origin. Close connection. And we get deeper into that, but here's another book, The Greek of the Septuagint. And then this is the book that first touched the scene. If there was a Jesus in Jesus' days, this is the book that they would have had in circulation to a certain extent. Now, they didn't have like no mass production of these books. They were just kept as they were because they didn't have no printing press or none of that. So it wasn't everybody walking around with a book in their hand. That's the play on it. You walking around with a book in your hand, opening up the book, teaching people from the book. They didn't have a concept of that reality that we live in today. Okay, so we're moving on along. This is what they have. This is the oldest version of the Bible known to mankind that's authentic. Now, the Torah scroll from 2 synagogues in Fayum, Egypt, some of the oldest, some most of it, but this is Deuteronomy 23, 28, 1406 BC. This is the only one they got. The small scribal spacing at the end of the word group, slightly larger group spacing at the end of clause sentence. Yahweh is not present anywhere, as could be indicated by spaces, 4 stars, or Paleo Hebrew. Insert. So that it was just trying to derive something from this Greek. But this is the ones that they're trying to say that was the lost pieces. And it do look like it's written, it's on papyrus. That's papyrus. I know papyrus when I see it. Okay, here goes some more. Right here. that they claim to be commissioned by Ptolemy II, Soter, 282 to 2046 BC. The Septuagint, this is Greek, I believe. And then there's the other one, there's Zechariah. There's some old looking paper stuff. I don't know what that is. That don't even look like that's that don't even look like that's what papyrus. It could be though, another form of cheap, some type of way, some other type of plant-based thing, when they start cutting trees. That's what they were working with. The Old Testament of 593 pages, and the New Testament has 183 pages in the Septuagint. Well, I think that's the Bible itself. Yeah, wasn't no New Testament. So that's not too many pages. That's, I thought the Bible was at least 1,000 pages. It's actually just like 800 pages. Close to 800 pages. I didn't know that. It's not bad. Now, the Library of Alexandria, the library quickly acquired many papyrus scrolls due laid large to the Ptolemaic king's aggressive and well-funded policies for procuring texts. It is unknown precisely how many. See, the Ptolemaic kings, they run the show at the library. And it is unknown precisely how many such scrolls were housed at any given time, but it estimates range from 40,000 to 400,000. Now that's a gap. If we ranging from 40,000 to 4, that's too big of a gap. But you know, we'll give them the benefit of that. Maybe mid-ground, maybe 100,000, 150, maybe even 2 at its height. I would say if they exaggerate that hard, that means they don't know at all. Okay, this is the 1st century AD Roman playwright and Stoic philosopher, Seneca the Younger, quotes Lives or Herb Conata Libra, which was written between 63 14 BC, as saying that the fire started by Caesar, destroying 40,000 scrolls. So this is when they grew kind of weak. And then the Romans started taking, they was deep into their fallacies and then deep into their stuff. And Caesar came, and there's another thing I think I need to do a story on him. You know, comment if you feel like I should do the Caesar story, you know, because we got a deep dive. We got to go into this on top of everything, no doubt. So, you know, 40,000 scrolls from the Library of Alexander was burnt, or approximately. And it's more than that because it has a height. So, where are these scrolls that were taken? And with all of this valuable knowledge that they stole from Egypt. Yeah, I don't know if this philosopher Seneca, yeah, sorry about that. Seneca the Younger. Look at him. It's crazy. Now, I wonder if this is a real piece. I wonder if this is actually, they might be. You know, he's definitely Caucasian in the face. They didn't knock his nose off because he fit with the bill. Okay. So, in ancient Roman times, a new Roman mythology was born through synchronization of numerous Greek and other foreign gods. This occurred because the Romans had little mythology of their own, and inheritance of the Greek mythological tradition caused the major Roman gods to adopt characteristics of their Greek equivalents. So let's break that down. In ancient Rome times, a new Roman mythology was born through synchronization of numerous Greek. Now we jump from the Greek to the Roman because we jump from the library action, and then we fast forward when the Ptolemaic got weak, and then the Egyptian thing, they tried to integrate other stuff. This is where we at, the ancient Roman god, not Greek gods. Remember, the Romans also adapted the polytheistic views of numerous Greek and other foreign gods. So they had a synchronization. So Zeus became Apollo. I don't know the real deep dive into that, but you get what I'm saying. It was polytheistic, but they changed the name and they synchronized same beliefs. Then they grew stronger off of that because they storytelling and mythological storytelling got deep. And this occurred because the Romans had little mythology of their own. They adapted the other mythological stuff from the Greek and inheritance of because they stole that from them. So the Greeks stole from the Egyptians and the Romans stole from the Greeks. Greek mythological tradition caused the major Roman Greek, but I think they're the same people actually. It's an evolvement of it, maybe a combination of tribes that European tribes that combine. And Greek mythological tradition caused the major Roman gods to adapt characteristics of their Greek equivalents. Yeah, that's deep. That is deep. So, they're just major gods. So there we go, it's polytheistic. Now, the position of the Jews deteriorated. Now, this guy here is what you call a depiction of what he might have looked like. But this is just, he has a Jewish look. What's that on his head? Like that, almost like gypsy look. Then he got on the pearls on his neck. He looked like some mink side, a fashion icon. And he wearing like a turban. And it's kind of feminine, I would say. It definitely was on top of it in them days. They got a whole new different scheme now. But the position of the Jews deteriorated at the beginning of the Roman era. Rome sought to distinguish between the Greeks, the citizens of the city to whom all rights were granted, and the Egyptians upon whom a poll tax was imposed and were considered a subject people. Yeah, so they started running over the Africans. It started a long damn time ago. It didn't like just start through slavery or the transatlantic slave trade or any type of slavery imposed on the continent. They was on something a long time ago. Now, during the widespread rebellion of Jews in the Roman Empire in 115, 117 CE, the Jews of Alexandria again suffered the great synagogue going up in flames as a consequence of these revolts. The economic situation of the community was undermined and its population got diminished. The Jews wasn't playing no games, but it was a rebellion. And then they got rid of their synagogue. So it was almost like, what are y'all doing? You know, you going against the grain. We're not having this. And but yet and still they're trying to say that the Jews had took a hit, a hard hit on the history book. Remember his story. His story. Okay, so Philo's deployment. We got Philo. Look like he done had a drink. Look at him. You know, he got his cape on and everything hooked up. Yeah, he don't look like it's safe to be around this guy. Philo's deployment of allegory to harmonize Jewish scripture, mainly the Torah, with Greek philosophy, was the first documented of its kind. Therefore, look, the Torah with Greek philosophy. What? They hit you dead in the head. This was the first documented of its kind, and thereby often misunderstood. Many critics of Philo assume his allegorical perspective would lend credibility to the notion of legend over historicity. So he's saying, you know, he was actually putting allegory to harmonize Jewish scripture, mainly the Torah. So he's switching and putting stuff together, you know, and I forgot to put a date on this dude, but let me see if I can go back anywhere. Nah, but this dude was somewhere around the early centuries. And he definitely was in a harmonizing Jewish scripture, mixing some stuff up. And this is before we even got it. So, you know, and in this particular thing, we're going to jump into some more stuff. We're going to go hard, but allegorical interpretation states that biblical narratives have a second level of reference that is more than the people, events, and things that are explicitly mentioned. Textual criticism investigates the history and origins of the text, and exegesis may include the study of historical and cultural backgrounds of the author, text, and original audience. Other analysis include classification of the type of literary genres presented in the text and analysis of grammatical and syntactical features in the text itself. Early New Testament texts include more than 5,800 Greek manuscripts, 10,000 Latin manuscripts, and 9,300 manuscripts in various other ancient languages, including Syriac, Slavic, Ethiopic, and Armenian. These texts are what we call the Hebrew square book script, first half of the 11th century. So this is when they start perfecting their craft and putting it into this new language called Hebrew. In the 11th century. Look at this. This is 11th century. This is before English even got down. But it's way after the Greeks, which invented it, because they basically the same people as we have deduced that it come from the Hellenism. And they don't know who wrote it. You know, I think this is the oldest. But it's the early two New Testament texts. Everybody was writing about 5,800 Greek manuscripts, 10,000 Latin manuscripts. What are Africans? Well, I guess we would say Ethiopic, maybe. But I don't think that it wasn't Egyptian, meaning it came from a later date. But it definitely has some type of Coptic thing. We'll get into that in another video too. But you know, as we move on, I got these are my sources. You can go to these sources, you can pause it, copy it. I don't have direct links. I might try to put direct links in the description. Getting down with this knowledge, telling the truth, or trying to and telling the truth and searching for the truth. Britannica.com, topic Judaism, myth and legend in the Hellenistic period. Britannica.com, topic Hellenistic Judaism. Jewish Virtual Library.org, Alexandria. Rootless.com, Greek myth in the Bible. This is some stuff worth checking out. So, if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. Definitely there's more to come. And I enjoyed talking about this subject. And we're going to do a deep dive into the next episode. And I'm going to try to follow up on where we left off here. And, talk about the Crusades and all the things it was dealing with and how they pushed Christianity. And, the Gutenberg, all the different versions of the Bible and how they took out a lot of stuff, the lost books, all in the next episode. And it's going to get deeper as we fall down this little rabbit hole into a different paradigm, and hope we can shape the minds of people. That's my goal. God bless everybody.